Is Lane Kiffin the most overrated coach in the SEC? Is he the most overrated coach in the country? I don't know. There's some interesting arguments around Lane Kiffin when you start looking at who he's actually beat. I'm thinking about doing a video on that maybe later this afternoon or tomorrow, but just what's Lane Kiffin's best win? Can someone tell me? Just tell me what Lane Kiffin's best win. Anyway, let's get past that. SEC Media Days is underway this week in Nashville, so I figured we'd take some time this week and do a couple of SEC team preview and prediction videos. This is a series of videos I do every offseason. We've been doing them for a little over a month. We got a little over a month to go before the start of the season. I usually end up doing between 25 and 40 or 50 of these every single year. There's a playlist on this channel called 2023 Predictions. You can click that playlist and it'll show you all the teams I've done. I think I've done 10 or 12 of them so far. But shout out to Tyler G over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. He wanted to see this Ole Miss preview and prediction video. So Tyler G, I hope you enjoy today's video. I really appreciate you helping to support the channel over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. If it wasn't for that Patreon page, I would not be able to do this full time year-round. So a big shout-out to you, Tyler, and everybody else over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. I really appreciate it. If you're a member of the Patreon page, you need to get over there quick. Find that post. It's the first post on the page over there about the prediction videos, and let me know what team it is you want to see me do a preview and prediction for. Season's still 4 or 5 weeks away, but it's going to sneak up on us really, really quick here. If you're not a member of the Uncle Lou Patreon page and you want to check it out, there's a link in the description of this video that'll take you over there. Have a look around. If you decide you want to get signed up, I would really appreciate it, and you too can let me know what team you want to see me do a preview and prediction for. All right, good morning. That is Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, in addition to that as well, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos every single day of the year-round, live shows, call-in shows a couple of times a week. We have a really good time here. Make sure you're hitting the thumbs up on this video. Check out the playlist of all the prediction videos I've done, and subscribe to this channel. Up today, we're going to talk about Ole Miss. We're going to do it the same way we always do. We'll wrap up last year. We'll take a look forward, who they lose, who's coming back roster-wise, any coaching changes, things like that. Then we're going to put the schedule up on the screen. I'm going to go through it game by game and give you a winner and a loser for every single week. All right, last year did not end well for Ole Miss. It was a tale of two seasons, really. They started out really, really hot. They're 5-0, 6-0, something like that, ranked inside the top 15. And in the second half of the season, it all just fell apart. They lost, I think, 5 of their last 6 games, something like that. Now, if you looked at the schedule heading into the season, you could sort of see that coming. Their schedule was backloaded. They played a bunch of terrible teams in the first month and a half or so of the season. Georgia Tech, Central Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Auburn, just horrible teams. And they beat them all like they were supposed to. So, and look, so, you get credit for that. But in the second half of the schedule, it all came undone. And you look at the second half of the schedule, and, road trips at LSU and Texas A&M. They did beat Texas A&M. Texas A&M ended up, just being absolutely horrendous. But you lose on the road at LSU, you lose at home to Bama, you lose on the road at Arkansas, you lose to Mississippi State, you lose the bowl game to Texas Tech. It just all fell apart and unraveled at the end of the year. Ended up being, an 8-5 team, something like that, after it just collapsed in the second half of the season. So they're going to look to avoid that this year. Now, there's not really anything Ole Miss can do about how their schedule lays out. Of course, the SEC office sets the conference schedule. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. Just so happened that last year, everything was backloaded. We'll see how that compares to this year's schedule when we put it up on the screen here in just a second. But let's take a look at some numbers for Ole Miss. I like to do this for every video. Talk about some rankings, some odds, things like that. So where do I have Ole Miss ranked right now? Well, I've got them. They're currently unranked in my top 25. I do 3 top 25s. I do one after signing day in February, one after the spring games in April. That's the current one. And I do a final top 25 preseason poll first or second week of August. So that one will be coming out in a couple of weeks. Maybe Ole Miss will move up some when I update the rankings here in a couple of weeks. But right now, I've got Ole Miss unranked. I would have them in the others receiving votes category if that was something that I did. I do a top 25. I'd probably have them somewhere in the 26 to 30 range right now. Nationally, where's Ole Miss ranked around the country when you look at these different, whether it's websites, magazines, whoever it is, pretty much everybody and their brother these days is putting out top 25 rankings or polls. Ole Miss, more than any other team I've previewed so far this year, is really all over the place in the rankings. There's several rankings that have Ole Miss ranked close to the top 15. I've seen them as high as 16, 17, 18 in several polls. I've seen them 20, 21, 22 in some polls. Like my ranking, they're unranked in several polls and rankings. So there seems to be sort of a wide opinion of Ole Miss heading into 2023. What's their win total according to Vegas? If you're a betting person or you like to look at odds, The Vegas win total for Ole Miss in 2023 is currently at 7.5 wins. And you're going to say, well, you can't win 7.5 games. This is a betting number, people who bet on these types of things. So you're either betting over 7.5 wins, which of course would be 8-4 or better, or you're betting worse than 7.5 wins, which would be 7-5 or worse. You're betting on the number of regular season games that a team will win. You're betting over or under whatever the Vegas number is. In the case of Ole Miss, 7.5. That just sort of gives you kind of a general idea of what the betting public feels about a team. So the betting public feels that Ole Miss is somewhere around a 7 or an 8 win team for 2023. Heisman contenders for Ole Miss. Not the usual suspects, which would be a quarterback, right? We're going to talk about their quarterback situation in a minute, but a running back Heisman candidate, I guess. And actually, he's probably one of the 5 best running backs in the country. I'm not sure how well known he is yet on a national level. He was a true freshman last year. I'm, of course, talking about Quinshon Judkins, but almost 1,600 yards last year as a true freshman. And that was splitting carries with Zach Evans, who just got drafted into the NFL. He'll be, I think, even more of a feature back in 2023. We'll talk more about that when we get to the offense, but he's got the best Heisman odds of any Ole Miss player. Now, it's still a long shot because, of course, he's a running back, and it's just really, really hard for running backs to win the Heismans these days. And you've got some really big-name running backs who are upperclassmen that have sort of done it for a couple of years that are ahead of him on this list. But the Heisman odds for Quinton Judkins are about plus 5,000. That puts him about 21st on the list, which is not bad at all for a running back, especially a sophomore running back. But he's 21st right now in the Heisman odds at plus 5,000. That puts him right around players like Connor Wegman, the expected starting QB for Texas A&M, or Nick Singleton, another true freshman running back last year. He played for Penn State. He also had a big year last year. He'll be a sophomore this year, as will Quinshon Judkins. They all have similar Heisman odds: Connor Wegman, Nick Singleton, Quinshon Judkins. What about the odds for Ole Miss to win the SEC? Of course, again, here we're talking long shot, but Vegas will let you bet on just about anything. They don't really care what you throw your money away on. So if you're allergic to money and you want to give some away, you can bet on Ole Miss to win the SEC. Believe it or not, though, they've got the 6th best odds. 6th. You can probably name the 5 teams off the top of your head that are ahead of them, but of course it's Georgia, Bama, Tennessee, LSU, and I believe Texas A&M is even ahead of them too. But they've got the 6th best odds at plus 4,500. Now Texas A&M, which is one spot ahead of them, plus 1,400. So there is a huge gap, at least according to Vegas, between the top 5 teams in the SEC in terms of chances to win the SEC. There's a huge gap between the top 5 teams and Ole Miss. A&M plus 1,400. They're 5th. Ole Miss plus 4,500. Auburn is 7th, so just behind Ole Miss in the betting odds to win the SEC, and they're at plus 8,000. What about a national championship? You really have to hate yourself, your kids, and money to bet this here. But again, Vegas will let you throw your money away if you want to. The Ole Miss odds for Ole Miss to win the national, or the Vegas odds, Ole Miss odds. The Vegas odds for Ole Miss to win the national championship are at plus 10,000. That puts them in the same ballpark as teams like Kansas State, North Carolina, TCU, and UCLA. Extreme long shot, to say the least. All right, Lane Kiffin, head coach, Ole Miss, entering his 4th year, 5-5 in 2020, the COVID year, the shortened season, 10-3 in 2021, so a pretty good year, double-digit wins, and 8-5 last year. The first year, the COVID year, 5-5, an Outback Bowl win over Indiana. Second year, 10-3, Sugar Bowl loss to Baylor. Third year, 8-5, Texas Bowl loss to Texas Tech. This gets me back to the beginning of the video. Can anybody name me Lane Kiffin's best win at Ole Miss? Is it Indiana in the Outback Bowl in a COVID year? Is it Arkansas in 2021? They beat a 4-loss Arkansas team in 2021. They beat a 4-loss Texas A&M team in 2021. They beat a 7-loss LSU team, and they beat a 6-loss Tennessee team. Is one of those wins their best, Lane Kiffin's best win? What about 2022, last year? 2 best wins last year, 7-6 Kentucky and 5-7 Texas A&M. Ole Miss has won the games they're supposed to win. They've had a really hard time beating the upper half of the SEC every single year. Just a fact. That's the records. Under Lane Kiffin. All right, let's take a look at the roster and the coaches and see who they got coming for 2023. Major coaching change for Ole Miss in 2023 on the defensive side of the ball. Got rid of their defensive coordinator and bring in none other than Pete Golding. ceremoniously dismissed, depending on who you believe, from Alabama. A lot of the Alabama fans were happy to see him go. They were disappointed with Alabama's defensive performance over the last couple of years, specifically giving up half 100 in a loss to Tennessee last year. But he's out in Tuscaloosa, finds a home at the Grove there in Ole Miss. And I mentioned this earlier, but they started out 7-0 last year. Ole Miss did, finished 1-5. Those last games of the year, 35 points per game they gave up over their last 7 games. An average of 35 points per game they gave up over the last 7 games. Defense got to get a lot better. We'll see if Pete Golding is the answer to their defensive problems, but they did make that change, bringing in Pete Golding at defensive coordinator, the only real major coaching change there. All right, let's talk about the offense, and then we'll move on to the defense. Quarterback is going to be interesting at Ole Miss this year. Jackson Dart returns. He played a lot last year, started a lot last year. But Lane Kiffin went to the transfer portal and brought in not one but 2 big-name quarterbacks out of the portal. He went and got, of course, Walker Howard. Is that who? I believe that was his name, from LSU. Now, he hasn't played before, but very highly recruited out of high school, very highly rated. Everybody wanted him. Spends 1 year at LSU, rides the bench behind Jaden Daniels and Nussmeier, enters the portal, lands at Ole Miss. So you got a young guy with a lot of potential that's never played, comes in through the transfer portal. Then he goes out and he gets Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma, who it seems like the guy's been in college forever. A ton of experience, has looked really, really good at times. Did not go well last year at Oklahoma State overall as a team. How much of that was Spencer Sanders' fault is debatable and really discussion for a different video, Oklahoma State video. But the point is, with a returning quarterback in Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin still felt the need to go out and get not 1 but 2 big-name quarterbacks out of the portal, and that has, of course, created a quarterback controversy heading into the season. Will it be Jackson Dart, a guy who will be in his second year in the system, a guy that Lane Kiffin's familiar with? Or will it be Spencer Sanders, a guy that's played a ton of football, has the ability to run around? We've seen him have really good seasons. I mean, Spencer Sanders has been on people's Heisman lists in the past. Didn't work out last year like we mentioned, but he's proven that he can play ball at a high level. We'll see how they go there as we get closer to the start of the season. But Jackson Dart, Spencer Sanders, I believe it'll come down to those 2. I think it's going to be Spencer Sanders. Now, a lot of Ole Miss people are telling me it's Jackson Dart. Maybe it will be, but just seems to me if Lincoln Riley, if Lane Kiffin was happy or satisfied with what he had in Jackson Dart, I don't really see the need to go out and get those 2 guys from the portal, but he did. So I kind of tend to believe we're going to see some Spencer Sanders, but we'll see when the season gets underway, right? Whoever it is, the passing game's got to improve. Ole Miss was amazing on the ground last year. And, of course, we mentioned Quinshon Judkins. He's back, true sophomore, 1,600 yards last year, 16 touchdowns as a true freshman. Now, that was splitting some carries with Zach Evans, who was also really good. So we'll see how Ole Miss sort of backfills that RB2 position this year behind Quinshon Judkins. But regardless, Quinshon Judkins is one of the best 4, 5, 6 running backs in the country. At least he was last year. No reason to think that he won't be again this coming year. But they're going to have to throw the ball better. They need a better downfield passing game, I think. They lose their top 2 wide receivers last year, but they went and got a couple of guys again from the portal. They brought a guy in from Louisiana Tech, I believe, and then a kid from Texas A&M. Now, the kid from Texas A&M has since been dismissed from the team, which is an alarming trend going around for these highly rated Texas A&M recruits from 2 cycles ago. You remember when Texas A&M signed that huge class that everybody talked about? A lot of them transferred after last year. Some of those people that transferred out of Ole Miss and landed at other teams have already moved on from that team. Georgia had one announced today. Smoke Bowie, a defensive back, went to A&M in that number 1 class they signed a couple of years ago. Wasn't happy there. Didn't work out for whatever reason after his first year. Entered the portal. Lands at Georgia. He's already gone before fall camp even starts. Same thing here with this wide receiver that transferred to Ole Miss. But anyway, they did go out in the portal and try to backfill some of those wide receiver positions that they lost from last year. Quinshon Judkins, of course, an absolute beast at running back position. Jackson Dart versus Spencer Sanders on the quarterback. And then as far as the offensive line goes, they lose their best offensive lineman from last year to the NFL, but they return 5 offensive linemen with a ton of starting experience. It's possible, even though they lose their best offensive lineman from last year, that overall their offensive line is a little bit better even than it was last year. I feel like people have this impression of Lane Kiffin that he's an air raid, throw the ball 40 times a game type of guy, and it just hasn't been the case the last couple of years. They've been one of, if not the best rushing teams in the SEC under Lane Kiffin, as opposed to maybe sort of the perception of Lane Kiffin being kind of a quarterback air it out type of guy. but I do think they need to improve their passing game if they want to sort of get from the 7-8 win mark up to maybe competing to win the West. And yeah, I know they went 10-3 in 2021, I guess it was. But I just went through their list of wins from that year. Their best win was against Arkansas in 2021. So they just have struggled. Even in that year when they were 10-3, I don't think anybody considered them ever a threat to do anything other than win a few regular season games. I mean, they made a New Year's Six bowl and lost, like we mentioned, to Baylor. But they've got to get better, in my opinion, defensively. That second half collapse last year, 35 points per game given up over the last 7 games of the season, unacceptable. You're not going to win very many games giving up 35 points or more. And the downfield passing game. Defensively, what's Ole Miss going to look like this year? Well, I mentioned they brought in a new defensive coordinator, Pete Golding. He's switching up the entire scheme, philosophy, and formations that they're running there at Ole Miss. They've been running a 3-2-6 defense there. That's out the window. We're going to go with a more traditional defense at Ole Miss this year. They've got some pieces back, and I actually like their defensive front. They bring back 2 really good defensive ends. They got a defensive tackle that's really, really good. We'll see what Pete Golding can do with them, right? At linebacker, they got a 5-star true freshman. Now, Ole Miss doesn't get a ton of 5-stars. So when they do, it's likely they're going to play early, play a lot, and probably even start. And I think that's the case with this linebacker. They got Suntarine Perkins, another one of these kids with the name Suntarine Perkins is at least pronounceable, so I give him credit there. But 5-star true freshman linebacker, I expect him to play a lot. You bring in another linebacker from Louisville, Monty Montgomery, I believe his name is. So an experienced guy to sort of help the new guy along. 2 safeties return, a corner return. Now you do lose several pieces from your secondary, but like most teams, the days of teams playing 4 defensive backs, those is just gone. I mean, it used to be 2 corners and a couple of safeties. You're playing 5, 6, 7 defensive backs per game now, right? 3 or 4 corners play on a regular basis, 2 or 3 safeties on a regular basis. So you lost 2 or 3. But it doesn't mean that you lost half your DBs or anything. You got 2 safeties coming back and a corner coming back that played pretty well last year. And again, you went out and got some transfers to sort of backfill, build for depth, that kind of thing. So clearly the thing with Ole Miss, in my opinion, is when can Lane Kiffin start winning some big games? Because like I said, I just don't know. I'll ask again, what is Lane Kiffin's biggest or best win as head coach at Ole Miss? I'm seriously asking. Is it 9-4 Arkansas? Is that the best win of his career? Somebody's going to have to let me know. I really don't know. So you got to start winning some of the bigger games. You don't have to sweep, Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M every year. You don't have to do that, but you got to start beating them from time to time, don't you? Yeah, you do. The defense has got to get better. You can't be giving up 35 points per game, especially in the second half of the season. And offensively, I'd like to see the pass game improve. All right, let's put Ole Miss schedule up on the screen. We're going to go through it game by game, and I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. All right, Ole Miss kicks things off at home against Mercer. A win. Uncle Lou's from Uncle Lou's home state of Georgia, the Mercer Bears. I've got some family members that attended Mercer, small school in Macon, Georgia. I haven't had a football program back for very long, but this should be a win for Ole Miss, obviously. If you lose this one, you got bigger issues to worry about than anything I say on YouTube. Ole Miss starts 1-0. Now, here's where things get interesting here. On the road at Tulane. Now, Tulane was one of the best stories of the year last year in college football. They only won 2 games in 2021. In 2002, they won their conference, made a New Year's Six bowl, and beat Southern Cal in, was it the Fiesta Bowl or whatever New Year's Six game it was. One of the best stories of the year last year. And they return a lot of talent from that team, including their quarterback. This is going to be a dangerous game here. Tulane might even be favored by a few points in this game here. It's on the road. You got to play them there in New Orleans. I actually think Tulane wins this one. I think Tulane wins the game here. I've got Ole Miss starting 1-1. That's the bad news. Good news is the cure for whatever ails you, playing Georgia Tech. You'll get a win there. Georgia Tech's horrendous. They've got a new coach in, which is good because Jeff Collins was just a complete disaster. I'm not convinced Brent Key is going to be some sort of great coach or savior at Georgia Tech, but anybody is an obvious improvement over Brent Key. I still think Georgia Tech has a long way to go in terms of talent. The administration there at Georgia Tech really isn't completely bought into the athletic department and the football program in particular, and it's holding them back. I don't want to get off on a rant on Georgia Tech. I think we all know how terrible they are. You'll beat them, no problem. You're 2-1. On the road at Alabama. I thought long and hard over the offseason if this could be one of those games that Alabama loses. It was close last year. Ole Miss blew it really at the end. They got down to the 5-yard line, actually scored a touchdown that would have won them the game. There was a penalty. The touchdown got called back. The very next play, Ole Miss fumbles. Alabama jumps on it. Game over. One of those sort of narrow escapes that Alabama had last year. It had 2 or 3 of them, really, where they won on the last play of the game. This was one of them. That was at home, though. You have to play them there at Alabama. Bama has struggled on the road the last couple of years, but not necessarily at home. I think this could be another tight game. Bama struggled against the run last year. I think they were 35th or 36th in the country against the run, which it's not terrible, but when you look at where Alabama used to be defensively, they just were a long way from that. Now, we already talked about your defensive coordinator situation, which obviously is a direct result of Alabama's defensive coordinator position. They got rid of Pete Golding. You got him. They brought in Kevin Steele, a 90-year-old dinosaur who spent time under Nick Saban a decade ago. He's going to try to shore that defense up. Now, they're going to have an elite secondary, maybe the best secondary in the SEC. If Ole Miss can run the ball on Bama, then obviously they're going to be able to keep this game close. Running the ball keeps the other team off the field. It chews up clock. It wears the defense out. It just does a lot of things. If Ole Miss is able to successfully run the ball, it could be another close game like it was last year. But since it's at home for Alabama, I got to go with Bama in this one. I think you lose there on the road to the Gumps. Then you play LSU, and guess what? This is going to be the biggest win of Lane Kiffin's career. I think LSU will be a top 10 team, even if they lose early in the season to Florida State, which I'm not convinced that they will. But even if they lose that game to Florida State, they're still going to be a top 10 team. You get them at home. The only thing that, well, there's a lot of things that worry me about this game. LSU is a really, really good team. I've got them in the top 5 in my preseason rankings. I think they're a really, really good team. And they'll be favored, even though it's a home game for Ole Miss. But I just have a feeling this is one where Brian Kelly slips up. Lane Kiffin gets a win at home following a tough loss on the road at Alabama. You got to watch out for the hangover effect if you're Ole Miss here, especially if it's a close loss at Bama. You have to put that in the rearview mirror and move on. But I think they somehow do it and get it done. I've got you beating LSU. I've already done an LSU version of this video, so you might already know that if you watched my LSU video. I've got LSU at 11-1. So I don't know if you're an LSU fan watching this video and you didn't watch the LSU video. Now you're mad because I think you're losing Ole Miss. You can be mad all you want. I've got LSU at 11-1 and winning the SEC West. So cry somewhere else. And then you play Arkansas. I actually think Arkansas beats you too. Here's the thing. Look at this stretch of games. We talked about last year's Ole Miss schedule. How the majority of the easy games were at the front of the schedule, and it got more difficult at the back of the schedule. Not the case this year. This is you want to talk about getting beat up in 3 consecutive games. Alabama, LSU, and Arkansas. 3 of the most physical teams, not just in the SEC, but in the country. Arkansas's offensive line is absolutely huge. LSU loaded with NFL players on the offensive and defensive line. Same with Alabama. Alabama might have the best offensive line in the SEC this year. These are 3 just brutal games in the trenches. I think it catches up with Ole Miss at the end here. And I think you drop one at home to Arkansas. My main takeaway here from this 3 stretch of games, you're losing 2 of these games, I think. It's very possible you lose all 3. You're going to be an underdog in the first 2 for sure. It's possible you're an underdog at home against Arkansas if you lose to Bama and LSU right before you play them, right? You could lose all 3. I've got you losing 2 of the 3. With a win against LSU. That takes you into what will be a much-needed bye week after that 3-week stretch of games there. You come out, you get a little bit of a break on the road at Auburn. First-year head coach Hugh Freeze. Now, he's coached in the SEC before, and he's won some big games in the SEC before. I just don't think Hugh Freeze has the quarterback on the Auburn roster right now that he needs to get Auburn to the level he wants them to be. If you remember, which I'm sure you do, because you're an Ole Miss fan and he used to coach there, he's got some big wins. He beat Bama a couple of times. I just don't know that he's got the players that he needs to run that offense on the roster at Auburn right now. I think he'd go on the road and get a win at Jordan-Hare. Come back home, play Vandy. Vandy's going to be an improved team this year. Their win total is only at 3.5. I love the over on that. If you're a betting individual, put some money on Vandy winning more than 3.5 games. But I just don't see you losing to them. This is one of those games that Vandy probably has got circled. Vandy's goal is just to make a bowl game every year. So they look at their non-con and they say, okay, we got to win 3 or 4 of our non-cons. And can we win then 2 or 3 conference games and they sort of circle 2 or 3 conference games where they think they might have a chance to win, this is one of those games for Vandy. This is one of those games where they feel like they can compete. I've got Ole Miss getting the win at home, though. You handle Vandy. Then the Texas A&M game at home, I think you lose this one. I don't think Texas A&M's winning 11 or 12 games. I don't think they're winning the SEC West. I don't even think they're making a New Year's Six bowl game. However, I do think they will be one of the most improved teams in the country, at least from in terms of overall record. 5-7 last year, probably going to get closer to 8 or 9 wins this year. Now, a lot depends with them, obviously, on their offense, which hasn't existed really the last couple of years, but their defense is really, really good. They got Petrino in there now. Will Jimbo let him run the offense or not? By this point in the season, I guess we'll know the answer to that. But I've got Texas A&M winning this game against Ole Miss, another home loss for the Rebels. On the road at Georgia, it's an interesting game here. Trivia. Ole Miss is the only team in the SEC that Kirby Smart has not beaten. This is something else you probably remember if you're watching this video and you're an Ole Miss fan, but Georgia last played Ole Miss in 2016. Kirby's first year in Athens, they traveled to Oxford to take on the Rebels, and Ole Miss absolutely destroyed Georgia. That game was over in the second quarter. Georgia's secondary was terrible. Ole Miss threw the ball all over the place and absolutely routed Georgia back in 2016. Since then, Kirby has beaten every other SEC team except Ole Miss. So this is an opportunity for Kirby to scratch that off his list. Georgia might be the most difficult place to play in the SEC right now. They haven't lost a home game in forever. I think Ole Miss loses on the road at Georgia. Then you finish up with ULM, Louisiana Monroe at home, and Mississippi State on the road. I think you beat both of those teams. And the Mississippi State win is going to be huge for Lane Kiffin because he has struggled beating them. And, you know, I don't think enough people respect how intense that rivalry is for the people directly involved in it, for the people of Mississippi, for the fans of Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Going 10-3 is great, but if you can't beat Mississippi State, they don't really care. Going 6-6 is not good, but if you're 5-6 and you get that win at the end of the year against Mississippi State to get to 6-6, right, then it helps people get through the offseason. Huge rivalry game. I think Lane gets a win there on the road at Mississippi State. First-year head coach Zach Arnett, tragic passing of Mike Leach at the end of last season, and I just think Mississippi State's going to take a couple of seasons to sort of turn the page from that. I think Ole Miss beats in-state rival Mississippi State. So losses to Tulane, Bama, Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Georgia. Ole Miss finishes 7-5 in 2023. Appreciate you watching. Leave a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Have a good morning.